The Legend of Zelda, a necessity for gracious living.
Few video game franchises are as celebrated as that of The Legend of Zelda 37 years after the original entry in the series debuted. Fans continue to demand even more. Thankfully, the upcoming Tears of the Kingdom game will soon have many gamers' appetites satiated for now. But what about those out there who are looking for a more retro Zelda experience? Perhaps what I'll be covering today will have you covered. On this channel and in the past months, we've looked at many awesome Zelda ROM hacks that have breathed new life into classic experiences. Recently, we have looked at Outlands, a fan project that reinvented the 1986 classic, and soon after that, Amida's Curse, a hack of Zelda 2 which improved the mechanics of the source material and offered up a whole new world to explore. Today we will take the next logical step forward and analyse the existence of a title built around the next official entry in the series. The brilliant A Link to the Past, the iconic Super Nintendo game that reunited the game's original overworld action with the 16-bit powerhouse's Mode 7 special effects, enhanced control pad and Sony-powered impressive audio chip. So let's talk about how this instant classic was reshaped to deliver something new yet familiar.
I am Lady Decade and this is the story of The Legend of Zelda Parallel Worlds.
A Link to the Past is easily one of Nintendo's most notable titles in the franchise. While the original game set the standard, the follow-up title, The Adventure of Link, has only recently received a fair bit of retroactive fandom. The shift to a 2D gameplay style was largely considered confusing and antithetical to the original's overhead concept. Further, the magic system may have been more confusing than necessary. Nintendo didn't hate the idea, they considered redoing the title on the Super Famicom using the Super FX chip, but would eventually bail on the concept. As of 2023, they have never returned to the side-scrolling adventures. Philips would investigate those as part of their CDI licensed titles, but the less said about those, the better.
Well, unless you really want me to, of course. Let me know down below.
With the launch of the Super Famicom and later Super Nintendo, Nintendo realised the formula they would follow for most of their franchise. They would give each console a definitive iteration of the franchise and maybe a second if there's something new to add, or a significant revision. Regarding the 16-bit powerhouse, The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past, or more accurately, Triforce of the Gods as it was known in Japan, the classic came out on the 1-year anniversary of the console, so the 21st of November 1991 would see the title's Japanese release, and the following April would see the North American launch with Europe in September. The game would end up being a smash hit, an all great, with it being the only Zelda game ever published for the standard Super Nintendo. A hunger was clearly there for more 16-bit overhead adventures on the legendary platform. The next proper title in the franchise, The Ocarina of Time, would come out for the Nintendo 64 and go down as one of the highest regarded games anywhere and everywhere. The 3D adventure was a proper evolution of Link's movement and skill set, effectively throwing out any of the sprite-based capabilities and much of the original formula that the 8-bit original explored and the 16-bit title perfected. Thankfully for us though, the fan game developer Euclid picked up the torch and developed a new adventure based on the beloved Super Nintendo game known as The Tower of the Triforce, or at least that's what it was known as when the initial demo came out in 2004. Though this version of the title was eventually scrapped due to persistent bugs, the creator would later pair with Seth to rework the concept into The Legend of Zelda Parallel Worlds in 2006, which is now considered the stuff of legends online in its own right.
Let's talk about this one's story.
Essentially, the character you play has moved from another land alongside a friend on a treasure hunt. Not long after arriving in this new area, many strange occurrences unfold. This includes the appearance of 7 mysterious people who have come seemingly out of nowhere. These 7 individuals begin questioning the inhabitants of Kakariko village about an apparent parallel tower. This tower is situated in the Skylands, located northeast of the village, but it is said that the legends surrounding the parallel tower were lost long ago, as the only elders who knew the legend have long since departed this world. Still, word begins to spread about the parallel tower once more, and the legend begins to be retold, with it becoming known that the tower played a role in a war long ago involving the power known as the Triforce. In fact, it is said that the Triforce itself is housed atop it. Still, no one knows how to get to the top of the tower. The 7 people who have recently appeared are said to each carry clues on how to do so. This news would spread to the King of Hyrule, who would invite the mysterious 7 to his castle. One night before their planned arrival, though, the king's assistant Dragor killed the king, claiming the throne for himself. Not knowing what had transpired, some of the 7 individuals with clues walk into a trap, and the power-hungry Dragor captures them, forcing them to tell him all they know about the tower. After learning of the true king's fate, a rebel force grows in Hyrule to plot against Dragor, who soon works out that 2 of the 7 individuals Dragor has captured are still alive and being held. The rebels rally anyone interested in the tower to help the 2 individuals still being held captive. Hearing about this, you play as the one looking to rescue them and eventually try to climb the tower.
Speaking of climbing a tower, thank you very much for helping me to climb the Tower of YouTube.
Sincerely, it's such an honour that so many of you have subscribed to this channel and support my work. Thanks to you, I am now in the final sprint, with this channel needing less than 2,000 subscribers to hit that elusive 100,000 mark. So hit that subscribe button now and help me receive the divine relic that is the silver play button. With it, I will become unimaginably powerful and granted boundless mystical power, becoming a grave threat to all adversaries.
You have been chosen by the goddess to fulfill this prophecy. Now subscribe or die.
Thank you, courageous one.
Obviously, this new adventure creates new characters, such as Dragor, but stays true to the gameplay of the original title. Version 1 was released at the end of 2006 and quickly garnered attention for its significant difficulty, but praise for its revision and creation of new graphics, sound elements, dungeons, enemies, and quests for the characters. Much like the original title, this one explores a split timeline, one with a harsh and cold world, one with a bountifully healthy world caused by the Triforce being used upon Hyrule's enemies. This iteration was considered an open beta and was soon followed by a version 1.1 release that handled minor fixes. Playing parallel worlds after being made familiar with the story. Just like in the original A Link to the Past, this adventure starts off with Link waking up in his home with the man who wears a turban with which he lives, taking his sword and setting off for combat. In A Link to the Past, this man is said to be Link's uncle, and this game describes him as a friend, but from my observation, what if I told you that they were one and the same? You see, in Sikh culture, out of respect, young people often refer to male elders as uncle, so he could be a friend who he refers to as uncle. Considering Sikhs are real-life Mandalorians and carry weapons as part of their religion, this makes even more sense. In fact, Sikhs are expected to embody the qualities of a saint soldier, showing no fear on the battlefield and treating defeated enemies humanely.
That is Sikh blood.
Like in A Link to the Past, you must seek out your uncle friend, but in this one there are far more enemies looking to seek and destroy you rather than with the original. My puns game is seek in it. In the greatness of the Super Nintendo's classic Zelda game, if you can recall, there was a brief period right at the start where you would be unarmed until you retrieved the sword from your dying uncle. While this process takes about 2 minutes tops if you know where you're going in that one, in Parallel Worlds on the other hand, things are far from straightforward. In fact, you have to make your way from home to the guardhouse, all the way over by where the church can be found in A Link to the Past. So quite the route for a character with no sword yet. This process can prove very challenging, and with no swords, players must use other means to defeat enemies, such as throwing bushes.
Ah, the bush is in my face!
Apart from being a hack of one of the greatest Zelda games of all time, perhaps this ROM hack is most famous for its insane difficulty, with this long stint at the beginning with no swords being a prime example of this utter bastardness. Everything with this one seems to have been turned up a notch in difficulty. For example, enemies often appear to need to take more damage to defeat and do more damage to Link when they make contact with him, and that's not even mentioning the crazy amount of baddies that often appear on the screen simultaneously. Parallel Worlds is certainly no teddy bear's picnic. Speaking of the level of challenge this one delivers, the game even forces you to play a big chunk of the first dungeon without your sword either, further evidencing that this isn't a game that was created with all gamers in mind. This one seems to have been designed for seasoned diehards, which makes sense, as I guess you've got to be pretty hardcore to seek out ROM hacks in the first place. I promise you that wasn't another intentional seek pun. Speaking of the challenge involved, a playthrough can feel incredibly cryptic at points. Many of the items found in dungeons and other areas on the overworld map are insanely well hidden and seemingly impossible to locate without needing to consult the internet for help. So, enemies are formidable, items are challenging to locate, and that's without even commenting on other aspects of this game's tricky dungeons. Just as one example, the player is forced to navigate through one where nearly all of it is covered in darkness very early in this one. This means the lamp item needs to be relied on to get any semblance of bearings in this disorientating environment.
It would be a bit like if this whole episode looked like this.
In this game, the bosses, and mid-bosses for that matter, can also be complete bastards. They are often ridiculously overpowered versions of bosses from the classic game, with them this time taking a stupid amount of extra hits to take out, and a crazy amount of obstacles in boss rooms designed to hurt gamers further. The whole thing often feels a bit nightmarish. Come the 16th of May 2008, enterprising developers were able to get the title running up on modified Wiis, which is definitely something the Big N would frown upon. On a high level, a modified Wii can run code not authorised by Nintendo, and thanks to a bit of fan hacking, the game could be injected into the Virtual Console release of Donkey Kong Country 2. So, if you've got a hacked Wii that you're still willing to boot up, you might have a great, if not questionable, way to play this ambitious and challenging title. If you want a slightly easier adventure, developer Puzzle Dude has been approved by Seth to release their take on the game called Parallel Remodel. This title is effectively a balance patch, as backtracking aspects were minimised, code problems were replaced, dark rooms were lit up for better visibility, and so on and so forth.
Tricky stuff.
The best way to summarise, I think, what it appears they were trying to do with this game was to make this a Link to the Past equivalent of what the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2 was to the original Mario game. They took a title with the same engine and mechanics, then cranked up the difficulty loads, and programmed many aspects that would subvert the experienced player's expectations to intentionally trip them up and re-challenge them. While this worked quite well for Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. Is obviously a more simplistic concept than A Link to the Past. Such a new coat of paint being given to this new Zelda game came with other issues that are arguably not as fun, such as lots of backtracking being required to get by, and the entire thing becoming a lot more confusing and cryptic too. That's without even mentioning a greater abundance of enemies which take more damage than they did before too. There is even one moment in the game whereby players complete a dungeon only to not receive a spiritual stone, preventing gamers from instantly getting the Master Sword. Such subversion is borderline trolling in my opinion. It's easy to see why players get frustrated with this one, as it seems to have only been made with experienced Zelda players in mind, but the difficulty spike is taller than many would be comfortable with. Still, despite its flaws, this game deserves to be championed for many reasons, as it truly offers a new A Link to the Past-like experience. These reasons include the effort to change the location of almost everything in the game, delivering a new 16-bit Zelda experience that so many of us have craved for so long. The current version of Parallel Worlds is version 1.23, released on the 27th of March 2017. If the project has not ended completely, it has likely come to a crawl with no news in the past 6 years. There is no doubt that Parallel Worlds is the most famous A Link to the Past ROM hack of all time, even if it is famously very difficult. If you enjoyed this, subscribe so that I can get that silver relic from the YouTube gods. Then why not check out my upload about when fans tried to make a 16-bit version of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. See you soon.